Thanks for tuning in to the weekly NFL podcast. This week, I'm joined once again by my good friend Michael Lyon. We'll talk about the Panthers-Bucs game, news including Rob Gronkowski's interview and Antonio Brown, debate which surprising Week 1 performances are for real, and give our Week 2 game predictions. Hope you enjoy it. All right, Michael, so we're here back to talk about Week 2 of the NFL season. The plan is always to start out talking about the Thursday night game because we do record on Friday, so you get that first game of the weekend. This one was between the Bucs and the Panthers, and honestly, I don't want to spend too much time on this game because it was pretty boring. Neither one of these teams really gave us much to talk about, and definitely I don't think either one of these teams look like playoff caliber at this point in time.
Yeah, that division is turning out to be maybe a little bit weaker than we thought. Cam Newton looks like he's not going to play very well this year. Same with Jameis Winston, who's looked awful for his first two games, even though they came out with a win last night.
Yeah, and this game, it starts out with, we get into the first quarter, but then it quickly breaks for about a half an hour weather delay, which is something you don't really see too often in time, but I guess that's what happens when you play games in the Southeast in the aftermath of a hurricane. Great planning.
Even despite that, it seems like the Panthers had plenty of opportunities to win this game, and a lot of that falls on Cam Newton to me. I know you know like some stats on like how bad he is, so why don't you get into that?
Yeah, so Cam Newton has lost 8 consecutive starts. Obviously, the Panthers had a big losing streak to end last season, and now 0-2 start this season. So 8 losses in a row for him as the starting quarterback. He has not thrown a touchdown pass since week 13 of last season, which is pretty incredible when you think about it. This is former MVP, former 15-win team. And he's always been known as one of the best running quarterbacks in the league. And we know he's taken a ton of hits over the last few years, a lot that should have been called that haven't been called. And he's been dealing with some injuries. And it definitely looks like injuries might still be a factor for Cam Newton. During this point last season, through 2 games, he had rushed for 100 yards. Through 2 games this season, -2 rushing yards, and in a few crucial plays for the Panthers where they had 4th and 1s that could have extended drives or even helped them win the game. They choose to go to other options. They choose one play they threw him in shotgun. One play they give it to Christian McCaffrey in the Wildcat. It just seems like they're not comfortable with him handling the ball and running or really doing much of anything in these big situations, which is really cause for concern.
Right, and I'll admit, I was talking up the Panthers last week.
You were a little bit.
They were my little upset, do better than expectations team.
Yeah.
2 weeks in, I take it back. I'm fully off the Panthers bandwagon. Their team looks like a mess, and it's unfortunate.
Yeah, and I think that's probably a good decision. And like you were saying, that whole division, the Saints I think they had a rough first half against the Texans, but I think both of those teams, the Saints and the Texans, look like real contenders after that matchup. But outside of that, the Panthers look bad. The Bucs, they win this game, but let's not kid ourselves. We don't expect much from the Bucs. And the Falcons also, they were down 28-0 at one point against the Vikings. So a rough start to the season for the NFC South. Your surprise team, the Panthers, not looking so great. My surprise team, which was the Jaguars, lost their quarterback in the first quarter for about half the season. That's okay though. We're fully on the Gardner Minshew bandwagon. I'm still riding the Jags, and
at least his completion percentage was up there.
Yeah, 88%. I think we'll talk about him and the Jags a little bit later. But I do want to transition to some of the weekly news that's been happening. And first I want to play for you a clip that I know we've both listened to, but if any of the people watching have not heard it, Rob Gronkowski did a sit-down interview, the retired Patriots tight end, retired, ? There's a lot of rumors of whether or not he might come back. After listening to this video, you're going to wonder why he would even consider coming back. But he was doing a sit-down interview kind of about concussions and whether or not he would let his son play football, and within it he said some pretty amazing things. So I'm just going to run the clip for you.
Allowing him to do flag football, and that's it. Son, I am not letting you play football because I know the injuries.
I will let my son play football, but first off, I will educate him on the game. Educate him on like what I went through, and I truly believe that anything, any injury that you receive is fixable, though. I mean, I went through it. I had 9 surgeries. Probably had like 20 concussions in my life. Like, no lie. Probably I remember like 5 like blackout ones. Like,
But you
I
said
don't remember.
you had a pint of blood drained from your
Pint of
body
blood.
after the Super Bowl because of internal bleeding.
Yes, because of internal bleeding. But like I said, I'm fixed.
Just the tone in which he talks about such serious things that normal everyday people would consider very big deals, like internal bleeding.
No, I'm pretty sure it's not just us. I'm pretty sure it's just a big deal.
Right, right. But he talks about it as if everything is fixable.
Yeah, so Gronkowski, this is, really interesting comments. Because again, I mean, Gronkowski is, you heard it, he's had a ton of injuries. He says 20 concussions, 5 blackout concussions, internal bleeding during the Super Bowl. Yeah, but he'd let his kid play football. Yeah, like no problem. Anything's fixable. So with all the concerns about CTE and, all the safety concerns with football, what do you make of such a high-profile player coming out and saying stuff like this? And, he's trying to make the case, I guess, for why his son should be allowed to play football and why people should still play football. But in the meantime, he kind of just sounds crazy.
Right, no, he does, and this kind of ties right into the argument that's becoming more mainstream about like CTE and like the dangers of playing football more serious, and more parents not wanting their kids to play football. And I think it is a bad sign about the long-term future of football, because if parents don't let their kids play, schools aren't gonna, like, football isn't gonna be the biggest sport for that team. People aren't gonna enjoy it as much. They're not gonna be as into it. And if people aren't as into it, then the profits are start to go down, and the league could be in trouble in the long term. And it's a big deal. Like, CTE is the Journal of American Medical Association did a study in 2017 showing 87% of former football players having CTE. If you count players that made it all the way to the NFL level, the number is 99%, which is ridiculous. And this is important because like the average death age for those people is 66 years old, which is significantly below the average age for normal people. It's a very serious brain disease that gets worse over time.
Yeah, and what we're kind of learning is that if you want to play football and you want to do so professionally, these are kind of the trade-offs that you have to make. And it's going to make it, so difficult to really make that decision. Because on the one hand, if you are one of the rare few, and it's even tough to say, even if you make the NFL, you have technically made it. Because the NFL career, the average career is like 3 years. It's very short. A lot of these guys just sign an undrafted free agent deal, and they bounce around some practice squads, and they never, most of these guys in the NFL, even a lot of the starters, never get the massive payday that kind of, sets you for life. Go, buy your yacht and have fun. And the risk of playing playing football, really at any level, but especially the NFL, in part because of how tough everyone hits, but in part because it's just by the time you've made it to the NFL, you've been playing football for like 10 years, So it's just all this gradual buildup over time as well. Makes it really interesting. And, obviously the game is going to have to be made safer. And I know there's all these concerns about us, like, taking the football out of football or whatever. But I kind of take issue with that argument, because if you go back in time, one of our old presidents, Teddy Roosevelt, almost banned football entirely because a lot of college kids were dying on field playing the game. There was something like 15 kids that actually died one year playing football. So, football has always been this kind of barbarian game that we've been trying to make safer. And, we started wearing pads and helmets and, looking less like rugby scrums and more like, the football we see today, and passing the ball, etc. And, with all the CTE research, it just feels like we're going to have to keep making those changes just to keep football something that we can, morally say is even acceptable.
Right, and we can keep making it safer. I'm not sure just the nature of the game. I'm not convinced that we can overturn these high instances of CTE, because this is something that's hardly existent at all in the general public.
Yeah.
And I've also heard the argument, that a lot of the people that are going to want to play in the NFL come from like rougher backgrounds, and they're not really going to care about the long-term impact. Like, it'll be worth it to them. They'll do anything to get over the poverty that they're in.
Yeah.
Because there's money to be made.
And that's a good point.
But my response, I don't think that's the best argument though, because I think once the people that fund the NFL, kind of like ticket holders and like the common everyday American that understands the danger of the game, once they start losing interest or stop wanting to play or stop wanting their kids to play, the money gets taken out of the game, and then all of a sudden, even for these like impoverished people, the money won't be there to be made in the first place, so that wouldn't even be a viable out for them.
I think that's a really interesting argument you bring up, because I think that is true. If you're someone that's coming from an economically disadvantaged background, or a rough inner city or something like that, the allure of getting out and of making something of yourself and playing football, which it's so recognizable, I think is such a strong factor, where I feel like if you grow up very wealthy, there's no, unless you're just God's gift to the earth, like there's not a ton of incentive to really get into football, because it is so dangerous, and there's just other things that you could be doing, and even other sports that you could be doing. So that's a problem just with inequality in society, and that's something that's I'm not sure if it's really fixable. But once it's going to be one of these things where if we keep getting more research and breaking news, if every news story we get on CTE only makes it look worse and worse, like we're not going to wake up one day and find a study that says all this is BS. Like, right. It's the real deal, right? So I feel like as we get more research and we know more about this, the game will change significantly, and we're already seeing in youth participation rates kind of the effects of this whole thing. A lot of people are switching to flag football, or they're not doing pads until junior high, or et cetera, or they're not playing football at all. There's a lot of kind of changes that are being made, at least in mindsets growing up. Right. And then, will that affect football fandom? Will that affect the amount of players playing, and eventually the quality of the game itself? There's a lot of things to figure out.
People like the sport and follow the sports that they play. That seems to be a definite trend.
Right.
So that, with participation rates falling, that certainly does not bode well for the future of the NFL. And I think you could see that market kind of be taken up by other sports. Like the NBA is growing really fast right now.
Like among our age group, I'm pretty comfortable saying basketball is a more popular sport than football is. And in certain subgenres of the population, probably soccer is as well. So obviously football, I think it's more attractive to our generation than, say, baseball is, but I think it's still in this similar kind of realm of, things that are not as popular with this generation as they have for the previous 3, 4, 5 generations, because those sports have kind of carried American athletics for 100 years.
And to be fair, it's still the biggest market, and I don't think
it is.
I don't think the short term will be. I don't think the short term will be really that affected.
As far as revenues are concerned, football's not getting passed for at least probably a quarter century.
Right, but I agree. But I think the long term future is definitely in trouble.
Yeah. So a lot of interesting things to talk about there, and maybe a little bit of a secret hint, nudge, nudge. We might be talking more about this and other topics in the future.
This is a big topic,
There's a lot to uncover in the future of football, both in the NFL and the collegiate game, and injuries and expansion and all kinds of interesting topics. But we are going to keep things rolling with the week 2 kind of news, and I think we'd be remiss if we didn't talk a little bit about Antonio Brown. Last week when we did the podcast, we were at the point where Antonio Brown had been suspended by the Steelers. And get this, just 1 week ago, the question was, will the Steelers release Antonio Brown and void him of the $30 million? That was what we were talking about.
Not the Steelers.
The Raiders, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
just another team that he's decided to quit.
Yeah, it was funny. We were talking about where they were at now, and then like here we are a week later, and it's like a completely like where we were at seems like 10 years ago.
Let's break down everything that's happened in the last week. So we were at a point where the Raiders had suspended him, and it was like, will they just release him? So then we get the Raiders like unsuspend him, right? They unsuspend him for week 1, and then everyone says, oh, the Raiders are so weak for doing this, whatever. Antonio Brown like goes on his social media, and he has this high quality like film production of him talking to John Gruden, and this big conversation about how he's like the misunderstood guy, and time to put away all the distractions. And, do you want to be a Raider? Of course I want to be a Raider. Nothing suggested that I don't want to be a Raider. And then this goes huge on social media, and it's amazing production qualities, etc. And it's amazing that someone would even choose to do this. And apparently John Gruden loved it, and he had okayed the use of his voice beforehand, which was a little controversial at the time. But then, literally that same night, Antonio Brown gets fined by the Raiders again for disclosing like the internal memo of him getting fined the first time, which was problematic. So after that happens, they're allowed to, and they choose to void the guaranteed money on his contract. So then we wake up the next morning, and Antonio Brown gets word of this, and he asks to be released.
Yeah, of course, that's not going to sit well with him.
One day after he says, "Of course I want to be a Raider." The next morning, release me.
Free, and it's not. It was more. It was like free me from this. Like
free me from the shackles of. It's unbelievable. And so, they do. And then he posts another video. He's celebrating. He's running around his backyard screaming, "I'm free!" All this whatever. And then within
the
2 hours, he's signed by the Patriots.
Right. It seemed like a good move for the Patriots at the time too.
Yeah, they paid him certainly a lot more than I would have paid him. But
all of a sudden they have a guy who was considered like the best receiver in the league 2 years ago.
And it's a no risk situation where they can. They're the best team in the league anyway, so if he pans out for them and he gets his act together, he helps them win a Super Bowl, and if he doesn't, and if he continues to cause problems, they can just cut him, and then he signs with them, and then 1 day later we get sexual assault and rape allegations against him. He's still practicing with the team. I believe they intend on playing in week 2. Obviously, if the NFL suspends him or puts him on the exempt list, that would have to change, as they're currently trying to investigate these allegations really quickly. But just the cycle of news continues, and I'm not even sure I can remember one NFL player that's dominated the headlines, in the off season and even into the regular season with so much just like chaos as Antonio Brown. And
it's still ongoing too.
It's still ongoing, and the thing is, it makes it difficult for us to make any official rulings, because all this stuff is still accusations at this point in time. But obviously, if any of it turns out to be true, and most of these allegations, I feel like, end up having truth to them. Obviously, I expect him to go on the exempt list, and I expect the Patriots, and I hope they would release him. But right now, it's just chaotic, and I would consider even releasing him just for just continuing to be a problem, just to be in the news, just to be a distraction. Because apparently the league nor the Patriots knew that any of this stuff could have come up when they signed him, and that was just a few days ago.
Yeah. Yeah, he seems to be a constant problem, and I think a lot of these players have like targets on their back in terms of like allegations. So I don't want to be unfair and like criticize him for something that he might not have done. Although I will say the allegations are very serious and very bad, and if any of it's true, then it looks very, very bad for him, because that's not something that the NFL is going to tolerate, and they shouldn't.
You say that. This is the NFL we're talking about, which, it's always, it's so difficult because you never know what's actually going to happen with any of this NFL stuff. But
I think it depends on the investigation.
Yeah, which is whatever, right? The NFL does what the NFL does.
All right, enough of Antonio
But yeah, enough
Brown.
with Antonio Brown. There's not too much for us to speculate until we get more information. I think at this point in time, he's probably suiting up for week 2, and we can even debate if he should be allowed to do that. But it is what it is. There are a few other kind of funny, kind of smaller stories. We had Sam Darnold. He's out for week 2 and maybe even longer with mono. Which is kind of just like a really random, funny story. Trevor Siemian gets the spot for the Jets.
And I'm not convinced that's a downgrade. I've never been too high on Sam Darnold. I mean, obviously, long term, you'd way rather have Sam Darnold, but it's not like he's been a star in his first year of the league. And Simeon's has a winning record as an NFL quarterback. Regardless, I don't think the Jets are going anywhere.
No, I don't. And their opponents, the Browns, have been in the news because they always are. Antonio Brown. First off, we had Odell Beckham Jr. Pardon me. We had Watchgate. He's playing in week 1 with like a $200,000 something worth of watch, which the NFL apparently it violates a hard object policy, which basically it could be used as a weapon or something to injure somebody, so he's not allowed to wear it. Odell Beckham, with one of the more interesting kind of responses to this, says like, they're trying to make it not about the football, so let's keep it about the football. And I'm still wearing the watch.
He's looking for the attention.
It's kind of like if it was only about football to you, it's just kind of like, well, don't wear the watch.
Right. Like, what's the point?
Yeah.
And the Browns so far haven't put anything on the field to talk about. So maybe he wants to divert the attention from their poor performance to
which I think is good.
Jewelry.
And maybe he's got an endorsement deal brewing as well.
Right.
But yeah, good for him to at least get the noise off his team's 43-13 loss in week 1.
Which was awful for them.
But he stayed in the news. They're playing the Jets this week. Jets defensive coordinator is Greg Williams, the former Browns defensive coordinator last season. He finished last season as the Browns interim head coach, actually. And he was also responsible for Bountygate on Brett Favre when he was coach of the Saints. They got him temporarily suspended from the NFL. And Odell Beckham is coming out with claims that his teammates have told him that Greg Williams, is similar to Brett Favre, was trying to get the team to injure him. And I do remember this because, normally in the preseason, I mean, obviously I'm a Giants fan, so I remember exactly the situation we're even talking about here. This was a couple of years ago, but the preseason is usually a time, you try to evaluate talent, but the main goal of the preseason is just kind of, get some reps without anybody getting injured, because you want everyone to be healthy going into the season. But the Giants, I believe, were playing the Browns, and Odell Beckham, essentially on a play, he took an unnecessary kind of late-ish hit that caused him to miss the first couple games of the regular season, and has some lingering problems as well. And he's reporting that he'd been told that Greg Williams had kind of orchestrated that whole affair, which is obviously he has this kind of reputation as being a dirty coach, and it wouldn't surprise me if it was true. But also, it's just, I think, Odell Beckham trying to stir up even more drama ahead of a game against the Jets.
Not this again. That's kind of my reaction. We were just talking about like CTE and stuff. I think the NFL has enough injury kind of problems to deal with as it is. They don't have time, and they don't need this kind of like purposeful, dirty stuff. So I hope it's not true, and we'll see.
And I don't know if if it's anything we can confirm or whatever. But the hit itself was dirty, and it's again, just there's going to be some heat in that Browns-Jets matchup. Last time the Browns and Jets played, it was last season, where the Browns got their first win in a year and a half. They beat the Jets it was Thursday Night Football, week 3 of last year, but this year we get week 2 on Monday night. So they've even upgraded this matchup between two titans of the NFL, the Browns and the Jets.
Right, and the Browns actually still, despite the hype, they haven't proven that they're going to make anything of themselves this year. Although if you want to win, the Jets are a pretty good opportunity.
Yeah, the Jets aren't making anything of themselves either. And it's one game. which does kind of transition into our next segment, which is trying to look at some of the more surprising Week 1 performances and kind of ask ourselves, should we be overreacting to this team's performance? Do we think it is indicative of how they will play in the future? Or do we think it's kind of just one game, anybody can get lucky, unlucky, have a good or bad game? So talking about the Browns, probably the most hyped team coming into the season. They have not made the playoffs in like 15 years. They've not won a playoff game since they moved back to Cleveland. And obviously, just 2 years ago, winless. Last year, 7-8-1. But all of a sudden, people are talking about them as a Super Bowl contender. And then they promptly, Baker Mayfield throws 3 interceptions, and they lose by 30 to the Titans. They commit 18 penalties. Seriously, they committed 18 penalties. And all of a sudden, it feels like the hype has died. So what is your gauge on the Browns right now? Are they going to be terrible? Or do they still have a shot at making the postseason?
So it seems like the only difference between this year and last year is expectations, or at least that's what we saw in Week 1.
And Odell.
And Odell. I'm not going to give up on this team. It's only 1 week. I don't think it would be fair to overreact because of 1 week, although it looks very bad. They still have a chance at making the playoffs. 1 or 2 more early losses that look that bad, because it's not like the Titans are a powerhouse. So 1 or 2 more losses that are that bad, and I think serious concern, and I would seriously doubt them as having any playoff chances. Although as it stands right now, I say just 1 game. Don't give up or overreact too poorly yet. Although it's a red flag. I think it's a red flag, but not a nail in the coffin.
Yeah, I think the problem is not with the Browns' Week 1 performance, but with our expectations for them ahead of the season. Because there's no reason we should have thought this team was making the Super Bowl in the first place. So I think if you're kind of disappointed by this performance, it's, were you really expecting this team to go 16-0? I don't really think so. Obviously, they still played really poorly, and I was very surprised to see them, A, lose, and B, lose that badly.
Right.
But looking at their division, the AFC North, it's a pretty wide open division, I feel like, at this point in time. Obviously, it was Freddie Kitchens' first game as the head coach.
Not a good look for him.
Not a good look for Kitchens. I could make a really bad, stay in the kitchen joke, but, I guess I did. But yeah, so I think they'll probably improve as the season goes on, kind of mesh. They have so much talent offensively. I think they'll for sure get better, and maybe the Titans are better than we think they are as well. I think, if I was feeling 10 wins on the Browns before the season, I'm thinking 8 now. But I mean, I think they still have potential for sure.
Similar spot for me, I'd say.
Yeah. Moving on, we were talking about the AFC North. I mean, a lot of surprising AFC North teams. So we also have the Steelers, who lost by 30 points to the Patriots, 33-3. Only kicked a field goal, and that was kind of a wuss of a decision. It was like a 4th and 1 from the 1 or the 2 yard line, and they decided to kick a field goal down 20 points.
Bad coaching.
Just to get on the board.
But they lost 33-3,
Yeah.
so it's not like a goal line decision or a borderline decision is what cost them the game.
They got dominated.
In every
They got
aspect.
dominated by the Patriots. They lose that one by 30, and then on the other hand, the Ravens, the third team that was expected to compete for this division, they go out and drop 59 points on the Miami Dolphins. We thought the Dolphins were going to be the worst team in the league. But after 1 week, the Ravens beat them so badly that the Dolphins players are asking for trades. So they had 42 in the first half. Lamar Jackson throws for 5 touchdowns. They get 60 yards on a fake punt when they're up 35 points. They're just, really, some people are calling that cruelty, bullying. It's pretty funny. RG3 got a touchdown in the 4th quarter. The Dolphins proved nothing. So we have the Browns, who we think are, the hype was too big to begin with. Then we also have the Steelers, who I think were probably the favorites, who take a huge loss, and the Ravens, who are also in the mix. They take a huge win. Is this the Ravens' division now, or are we overreacting to a 59-10 win?
So my reaction is hold up on the Ravens. I am not convinced of anything yet. You have to remember, the Dolphins are arguably the worst team in the NFL. That's what a lot of people see right now. The last time Lamar Jackson played against a real competitive football team, it was one of the worst performances we've ever seen in modern history. People forget just how bad it was. He had more fumbles and interceptions than completions at halftime in that playoff game. With 13 minutes left, he had 25 yards passing and 27 yards lost on sacks. He led the league in fumbles last year despite starting only 7 games. His QBR was 48.7 for all of last year.
So you're not a fan.
Right. that would be an understatement. This is after last game. He's saying like not bad for a running quarterback, and I get it. He had a good game, and
First of all, I love the not bad for a running quarterback. I think it's hilarious.
It was funny, and he passed the eye test for a lot of people, I think, which is fine. But this is not a guy who's put up consistent numbers. This is not something. He did have an off season to grow, so it's not like it's impossible for him to improve this year. But one good game against the Dolphins, my reaction is kind of like not yet. And not that I have high opinions about other teams in the NFC North. The Steelers don't look good, the Browns don't look good. The Bengals look decent against the Seahawks, so who knows, maybe they could be a little bit of a sleeper team and what before the season looked like a 3-team race for that division, maybe, or 3 possible, and then the Bengals being like the trash bottom seed. But the way they played against Seattle, who knows?
Yeah, I think kind of the week 1 takeaway from the AFC North is kind of like this could just be a 4-team race, which is exciting. I don't think any one of these teams are great. However, I do think the Ravens have been notoriously underrated for the last few seasons, and I feel like their defense is going to be very strong, regardless of what Lamar Jackson does. And he's taken this year to develop. Obviously he looks like a running quarterback, but he threw 5 touchdowns. It's even if it's against the Dolphins, it's against another NFL team, and I feel like they're going to have a similarly very easy win against the Cardinals this week. Which you can call, you can call it what you want. Oh, they're, just beating up on easy competition. But, you play who's on the schedule, and at some point, they're just going to keep racking up wins. And regardless of if they're the best team in the league or not, the record is, going to reflect a quality team, which I think they are. I like the pickup of Mark Ingram. He had a fantastic game. They had over 600 yards of offense. Even they put in the bench warmers. And even with them, they were going up and down the field. It's like, no, guys, we're trying to kill clock here. They just kept scoring.
Which is part of the reason I think it says more about the Miami defense than anything else.
That's possible. But, again, I don't remember a time we've seen as lopsided of a football game.
Right.
They had 59 points. If they wanted to, they could have hit 60s, maybe even 70s. Do you even remember the last time an NFL team hit 60 in a game? Because I do not.
No, it was pretty bad.
Yeah.
But and I agree with your like eventually you have to admit they're good regardless of who they're playing. I still want to see it more. It's still 1 week against the worst team in the NFL. If they do it again against Arizona and again in week 3 and 4, then I'll say okay, hold up, maybe there's something there. And I'm not gonna hate their defense is one of the best defenses in the NFL. I need to see more from their offense. I don't think it's there yet.
I expect the Steelers to bounce back, and I expect the Browns to bounce back. But I think you still have to have the Ravens as the favorite in this division right now. Because if your favorite isn't the Ravens, then who is it?
That's a fair point. I take the field. It kind of.
Okay. I think I might take the field too, but I think the Ravens are the
because
front runner.
as we were talking about, it's kind of a 4-team race. I think if the Ravens win the division, it'll be because the division's so unbearably weak, which is kind of weird for us to think about the NFC North. It's been so good for so long, and then all of a sudden, all of these teams could could have a losing record this year for all we know. The Steelers looked very bad, and I think a lot of people were high on them coming into this year, and I wasn't as high. I think losing Antonio Brown and Le'Veon Bell was a big deal because that was those were the core offensive pieces of the explosive like the three Bs, Big Ben and Bell and Brown.
Yeah.
Like that was the core of this explosive Steelers offense. It's almost to me as if if you took Michael Thomas and Alvin Kamara off the Saints, would they still have a good offense? Would they still be a good team? I mean, they might not be horrible, but they certainly wouldn't be in the same category that we put them in now. So that's kind of how I'm looking at the Steelers. They lost their star receiver and their star running back, and people are kind of hyping up Juju Smith-Schuster, and he might be a solid receiver, but I need to see the Steelers prove it too, because this is a big red flag for an offense that lost some of its key pieces this offseason.
Yeah, I think what's held at me a little bit is we did see the Steelers play all of last season with James Conner instead of Bell, and Juju Smith-Schuster had an amazing season. And week 17, without Antonio Brown, they were still able to beat the Bengals with no Bell, no Brown. So I think they've proved they can do it. I think they need to get back in their form for sure. It's, of course, if week 1 they go play in New England, like it's the worst possible situation. And they weren't ready for it, and they just got beat. But, definitely not willing to give up on the Steelers. I still think the Steelers are going to be a good team this year. I think they just need to get their act together and play someone that's not the Patriots.
Yeah, I think the bottom line is just a lot of uncertainty for the AFC North.
Yeah.
More so than any other division, for sure.
Probably. I think the only one that comes up with it may be the AFC South with the Texans and the Titans and the Colts and the Jags. I think that's a 4-team race.
Yeah, I agree. Texans
especially
favorites,
the Colts, yes. And the Colts played well against the Chargers, better than we thought they would. Took that game to overtime. Vinatieri missed 3 kicks. They should have won the game.
Right. I think people maybe forget a little bit. They have a really good team around Andrew Luck.
Yeah.
When people were saying they could compete for the Super Bowl last year, it wasn't because Andrew Luck is like the next coming of Tom Brady, which he was a really good quarterback, but people were excited about that team because of how deep it was, how good their defense was playing, how good Marlon Mack kind of emerged. T.Y. Hilton's a really good receiver. They're kind of like a deep, well-built team, and they could build off of that this year, even without Andrew Luck.
Yeah. So I do want to switch, before we get into our Week 3 picks, over to a couple more teams from the NFC. Talking a lot about the AFC and how we shouldn't take one game as gospel for these teams' whole futures. One team that I'm really not feeling high on at all is the Atlanta Falcons.
I'm scared for the Atlanta Falcons.
I feel like this could be a team that really just kind of blows up, because they felt like, they have so much talent, they have Matt Ryan and whatever, but they're turnover prone, their offensive line is shaky at best, and they have no defense.
Right.
And they played a game, and even their special teams was getting eaten alive. They played the Vikings in week 1. Obviously it ends 28-12 because this is what happens with the Falcons all the time. They go down big, and then Matt Ryan just starts, slinging the ball in the fourth quarter and gets some cheap yards and touchdowns. But they were down 28-0 this game. They open this game. They get their first punt blocked. The Vikings score. They fumble. The Vikings score a touchdown. They throw an interception in the end zone at one point. Vikings come back, score another touchdown. They just make too many mistakes to compensate for all their talent. And again, defensively, I don't think they have it in them to be, a solid team overall. And they're getting the Eagles at home in week 2, which if they can win that game will completely, clear a lot of the doubts out of the way. But I don't have much at all in terms of confidence for the Atlanta Falcons moving forward.
I'll be taking the Eagles in that game. The thing about the Falcons, they're stacked at receiver. Matt Ryan's had his ups and downs in his career, and that's about it. They have lots of problems. This is a team this core has been to the Super Bowl, and they've missed the playoffs with the same kind of core. Devontae Freeman looked horrible last game.
And that's the thing. Devontae Freeman, he was good for a few years last year. He was injured for most of it, and now it's like,
Do you trust him? Maybe.
Is he really going to come back from, the injuries to where he once was? And the answer is probably not.
Yeah, maybe, but probably not.
And then lastly, before we get into the picks, actually, I don't know. First off, I might kind of rag on you for the Lions blowing a 17-point lead to the Cardinals.
We can talk about that.
I was gonna talk about the Bears, but we talked a little bit about the Bears on last week's show. I think that the moral is kind of Trubisky needs to get a lot better, and the defense will still be good, so it kind of relies heavily on quarterback play. But let's talk about the Lions and the Cardinals. This just kind of came to me because this was an interesting game. The Lions dominated it through 3 quarters. They're up 17-0. At one point in the fourth, they're up 24-6. 21-6.
It was 24-6.
Yeah, it was
so
24-6.
Let's just
and then it ends up going to overtime. So what happened there?
Yeah, so let's just say before the game, wasn't worried. Cardinals are one of the worst teams in the league, and the Lions are they don't have the best projection this year, but we can beat the Cardinals, right?
I picked and remember if you said last week, I went upset and I picked the Cardinals because I said the Lions feel like they might just be that team that can blow it. And then guess what happens?
Halftime, wasn't worried.
Nope.
Third quarter, wasn't worried at
They
all.
had the Cardinals had 5 first downs and like 3 points at the end of the third quarter.
In fact, I was so not worried that when David Johnson caught his receiving touchdown, I was happy that it helped my fantasy team. I wasn't even, I was rooting for them to score, and it was just a collapse. Everything went wrong at the end. Our offense looked atrocious, and Matthew Stafford's had his share of fourth quarter comebacks, so I was kind of surprised to see them choke so badly.
Yeah, the Cardinals get the late touchdown in the 2, and they tie the game. Gets to overtime, it goes field goal. With a minute left, the Cardinals punt the ball back to the Lions. Lions get on their 5-10 yard line. And then you remember the second to last play in the game, Matthew Stafford literally almost throws the game away.
Right.
And in that situation, it's they need 50 yards for a field goal, but he's throwing this 15-yard corner out to Amendola, and literally the defender drops a pick, and if he catches it, the Cardinals are kicking a game-winning field goal.
Very disappointed with the ending of that game. At least we didn't lose, I guess. Ultimately, I don't think either of these teams have too bright of a future this year. Maybe a little bit of a spark for Kyler Murray, but I think this is more about the Lions' defense choking than anything else, which is disappointing.
I do think it shows good resilience, though. It was the first game for Kyler Murray. It was the first game for Cliff Kingsbury. There's been a lot of thoughts over whether they can, both of them really can translate from the college game to the NFL game. I don't think they're going to be good, but I think they're going to be a fun team to watch because they just show that they can play terrible and they can still just kind of flip a switch and just kind of go off.
Maybe. Yeah, we'll have to see.
We'll see if they can do it against a better team than the Lions.
Unfortunately, that's a fair point.
Okay. And then as always, going to finish this up with the picks for week 2. Started off with the Bucs and Panthers. Bucs win 2014.
I got the Bucs.
I got the Bucs in that one. Totally got the Bucs. Totally called it before the game. I called the Bucs to. I called the Bucs against the spread. I did not pick them straight up. So technically, kind of 50-50 there. First game. This is actually, it's not a game between the greatest teams in the world or anything. But I think it's going to be a very close game, and that is the Bengals are hosting the 49ers. So Bengals favored by 1.5 at the moment. 49ers, we saw them win last week. Jameis Winston threw them 2 pick sixes, so that's kind of how that happened. But the Bengals looked really good against the Seahawks.
They did. I'm going to pick the Bengals in this game. I think John Ross looks really good.
He did.
Who knows? I think the bigger reason I'm picking the Bengals is that I'm not really convinced on the 49ers. I don't think Jimmy Garoppolo has been very convincing. They did squeak out with a win, but Tampa Bay played very bad, and we've talked about their struggles this year. So I think Cincinnati might just really be the better team at this point, and I'm going to pick them.
Yeah, I don't really have much to add. Same, I was going with the Bengals. I don't think the 49ers... I'm not super high on the 49ers. I think they can beat some of the lower opponents, but I think it should be a close game, and I'm going Cincy as well. Chargers-Lions, the next one on the list. Chargers on the road, but they are favored by 2.5 against the 0-1 Lions. Ties look so weird. And this is going to be a big game for them. Obviously, they almost lost from week 1 to the Colts. Already getting hit by the injury bug, which is, it just feels like every year the Chargers get killed by injuries. Hunter Henry down now. Melvin Gordon still sitting out. This is going to be a big game for them to kind of get their momentum going. And I do like the Chargers to win the game.
Close spread at home. I have to pick my Lions in this one. A little bit of an upset pick, but the Chargers have been inconsistent this time.
To be fair, I'm going to do the same thing in about 5 minutes when I pick the Giants to beat the Bills. So.
Yeah, but the Lions have a chance to win this game. They have a little bit of offensive firepower, and the Chargers, yeah, you talked about their injuries, and they've looked inconsistent too, so we'll see.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's not what I'm going to kill you for. Vikings, Packers. This is a big time.
This is a good game.
Both 1-0. This is for the lead in the NFC North, which should be a really fun division this season. We did see the Packers, beat the Bears in that first game of the season. We saw the Vikings be dominant over the Falcons, and I don't think they're going to be dominant, but I think they're going to come into Green Bay, and I think they're going to get a win.
Okay, that's another difference.
Yeah.
I'm going to roll with the Packers in this game. And it seems a little bit at this point like all we have left in Aaron Rodgers is just trust, because it seems like things have been a little bit inconsistent, worrisome. They haven't performed up to expectations for the last few years, really. And with all that being said, I still trust Aaron Rodgers. I think the Packers are going to have a good year this year, and I trust him to tear up the Vikings defense and get that win.
Vikings got a good defense. We'll see if he can get the protection he needs.
They do, but it's Aaron Rodgers.
Colts and Titans. Interesting game. Titans favored by 3 at home, so it's kind of a pick 'em if it was on a neutral field. Again, Colts look good. Titans look better. Obviously, Titans looked really good last week.
They did.
And I don't think they're as good as that 43-13 game would suggest. But I like them to beat the Colts.
Yeah, I'll pick them to beat the Colts as well. We talked about how the Colts maybe are a little bit better than people think, and I still maintain that. But the Titans, I don't know, they looked pretty good last week. Their defense looked hard to beat, and maybe that's because the Browns just blew that game. I think time will tell on that, but so far I don't see a good reason to pick against the Titans in that game.
Yeah. We have the Patriots playing the Dolphins. So we know the Patriots are going to win the game.
We can skip this one.
But no, the question is, they're favored by 19 on the road, so
the spread?
More or less than 19.
I go with more. I'll take the over on that spread.
Crazy. My official pick, I believe I went 34-17 in my official picks, which you can find on Medium. But that's a 17, so I'm going to go under.
Barely.
Giants and the Bills. If the Giants want to make something of this season, they have to beat the Bills at home. I'm a Giants fan, yes, but also the Bills turned the ball over 4 times, and they were still able to beat the Jets. I don't think they could pull that off 2 weeks in a row, so I'm going Giants.
Yeah, you know what? I'm going to take the Giants at home as well.
Let's go.
Yeah, the Bills are 1.5-point favorites.
That's pretty embarrassing, by the way. To be 1.5-point home underdogs to the Bills.
Right. That was just the Bills game last week against the Jets. Was kind of an embarrassment of a game. That doesn't mean a whole lot to me. Saquon Barkley's going for over 10 yards a carry right now. I think as long as it's a close game and the Giants can stick to running the football, the pace of the game is going to favor them.
Let's run the ball, guys. Yeah. Let's run the ball with Saquon. Give him more than 10 carries this time around. He's only the best running back in the league. Hot take. Lukewarm take.
Lukewarm. A little mild.
Seahawks Steelers. This game was the biggest surprise to me as far as spreads are concerned for this week. We saw the Seahawks win the game, and we saw the Steelers get smashed by the Patriots. And it comes back, and at one point, I think when I was reviewing it, the Steelers were favored by 4.5, 5 after getting smashed. Now it's down to 3.5. But I'm still surprised that the Steelers are really even favored in this game, despite the fact they're home. And I am going to take the Seahawks. No, actually, I'm sorry, I'm not. I am taking the Steelers, but I think it's going to be a closer game than the spread suggests.
Yeah, I agree with your comments on the spread, and I'm going to pick Seattle to win that game. They're my Super Bowl pick. I'd be stupid to not pick them against a team that just got blown out by 30 points last week. So,
I called a 1-point game in this. I believe I called Steelers 24-23, and it was one I was going back and forth on a little bit. Eventually did decide to go with the Steelers because I do think they're going to be better. And again, the Seahawks game didn't exactly inspire a ton of confidence, but still surprised to see the Steelers with the relatively big spread there. Cowboys 5.5-point road favorites against the Redskins. I feel like no reason to say anything but the Cowboys.
Yeah, no way the Redskins win that game. All the Cowboys have to do is run the ball with Zeke, and that should be a winning formula.
Chugging along a little bit more. Ravens 13-point favorites against the Cardinals. So once again, we know they're going to win. But more or less than 13.
I'll go less than 13. I went on a big segment kind of targeting Lamar Jackson and the Ravens.
You did. You're not a
And
fan.
so I think they'll be a little bit exposed next week maybe. I think they still get the win. I'll go less than 13 just because the Cardinals look so bad. But maybe a closer game than people expect.
And since you said more last time on the Patriots game, I'll say more this time. I think you got a young quarterback going up against what might end up being the league's best defense. And I think this is all the makings of, every a couple times every year, the Ravens just kind of have these field day games where they just destroy someone. They did it in week 1. And they're not going to put up 59 by any means, but I think they're going to have another big game in week 2. So I'm going to go even over the 13 points there. This was my other surprise spread, the Texans and the Jaguars. Gardner Minshew played really well, actually, in his kind of step-in performance for the Jaguars. But the Texans are favored by 8.5 at home against Minshew and the Jags. Again, a little higher than maybe I was expecting. I am going to take the Texans, but not by that margin.
It's a pretty big spread, especially there's kind of a lot of hype around the Jaguars maybe rejuvenating that season they had where they challenged the Patriots in the playoffs. And not much Gardner Minshew played well in his replacing Nick Foles. I'll take the Texans by less than 8 as well because the Texans looked really good despite their loss and might be borderline Super Bowl contenders this year. That offense is loaded.
Gardner Minshew has a better mustache than anyone on the Texans. Changed my mind. Raiders home against the Chiefs. Chiefs are 7-point favorites. The Raiders are 1-0, by the way. We didn't talk about that, but to go through all the Antonio Brown and the Hard Knocks and still be able to win a football game, kind of impressive. Kind of just thought they would be terrible, but they get the win. Good for them. I don't think they're going to beat Pat Mahomes.
Right, it was a good win for them week 1, but let's be smart and take the Chiefs.
Yep, taking the Chiefs. Speaking of their opponents, the Broncos do play the Bears in a matchup of two teams that really underperformed in week 1. I think this is a great opportunity for the Bears to get their first win of the year, even though they're on the road.
Yeah, no, it's a great opportunity for them to bounce back. I don't trust Denver at all. Losing to Oakland was a very bad sign. Their defense has been solid in recent years, but I don't see reason to trust that team. And let's take the Bears.
Yep. Game of the week here. This will be Fox's game of the week. Rematch of the NFC Championship. Saints and Rams. Rams are home. Rams are 2-point favorites. I say, forget about that. This is the era of Drew Brees and the Saints. They are my Super Bowl pick coming out of the NFC. So I think they're going to need to be able to beat teams like the Rams. And I think playing in such a tight atmosphere as they did against the Texans last week will help them a lot. So, and by the way, the Rams just barely beat the Panthers. So now going back and seeing what the Panthers did this week, not a ton of confidence there.
That's fair. I'm going to pick the Rams in this game to win. I think the Rams have a lot to prove in this game. Both teams have a lot to prove, but after all of the things that were said after that blown call in the NFC Championship, obviously that was more hurtful for the Saints, and that was a big blow to their team and their morale. But at the same time, there's no way that the Rams were sitting around being happy that everybody said they got lucky to get in the Super Bowl. So I think they're going to want to prove that they were actually the better team, and their offense is very good. Todd Gurley maybe has a chance to bounce back after not being a factor in that championship game, and I'm going to pick the Rams in this one.
Okay. So that's another one where we split, but I think either way this game will kind of set the tone for the NFC this season. Whoever wins that game is going to be the favorite moving forward. Sunday night, another team that is trying to fight into that mix to be one of those favorites in the NFC is the Philadelphia Eagles. They go into Atlanta. They are 2-point favorites, and I just talked a little bit about how I think the Falcons have the potential to really kind of fall apart this season, rather. So I do think the Eagles are going to keep up. They had a really poor start to their game against the Redskins, fell down 17-0, but after that kind of put it all together and then just kind of ran away with it a little bit. And I think they can, start off strong where they lacked in week 1 and then just kind of play a better overall game than the Falcons.
Yeah, I have the Eagles as well in this game. They're the better overall team. They have higher expectations this year. Carson Wentz is looking like he could be really good this year. I got the Eagles.
Yeah. And then Monday night, that'll be our final game of the week. We have the Cleveland Browns trying to bounce back against Trevor Simeon's Jets. Yeah, I don't think the Jets are too eager for this one.
I got the Browns in a bounce back win.
I do as well.
Maybe it won't be the most convincing win, but they should have enough talent to get that win.
Absolutely.
Big problems for them if they lose week 2.
Yeah, big problems for them. I think the loser of that game is in a really tough spot. So that'll be the Jets.
Right.
So moving forward, so by the time we do this next week for week 3, hopefully the Browns have bounced back. We've seen some life out of the Steelers, some life out of the Bears, and we get a little bit of a better sense for where we are in some of these close divisions, like the NFC North with that Packers-Vikings matchup, like the AFC South with the Colts playing the Titans and the Texans playing the Jags. That's a fully inter-division week there. And early on, just trying to get a better sense for these teams, and hopefully in a week or two, we can really start pegging them down for who are real contenders and who, hint, the Falcons are not.
Yeah, it's been fun.
Yeah, been fun.
Be back next week.
Be back again next week. That's right. You can follow all of my stuff at Connor Grohl on Twitter and Medium. And Michael, you have any plugs for us?
You can follow me on Twitter at.
Let me look up my handle.
Yeah, I'm literally looking it up. At Michael_Lyon1 on Twitter.
Boom.
Yeah.
Go to my Twitter for all the updates. All right, so thanks again, Michael, for being on the show. We'll be back next week and every week with more NFL content and maybe some other stuff as well. So we will see you then. Have fun on Sunday.
Thanks for having me, Connor.
Of course.